My name is Janice Lessman-Moss, and I'm an artist, and my main medium is textiles, weaving. That's my specialization, and I work with digital textiles. So I'm interested in that connection of the digital and the hand. Actually, I look at my designing on the computer as being an extension of my hand. So I don't look at the that virtual world as actually being really separate from my making skills, because anybody who has worked with the computer does understand how drawing in Photoshop is it's a real kind of hands-on activity, and it allows you as an artist to be both methodical and intuitive. And I like that balance. And that is kind of a perfect way to perceive textiles. There's kind of that logic and imagination. I look at that balance because a lot of what I do is about very mathematical, kind of counting. And then the other part of it is much kind of more serendipitous. And some of that happens in the virtual world of the computer, and some of it happens when I'm actually at the loom. But there is a really strong connection between those two things because of the binary kind of functioning of both tools. The computer with zeros and ones, and the loom with up and down. So the warp is up or the warp is down. And when the warp is up, the color of the warp then shows on the front of the weaving. And when the warp is down, the weft color shows on the front of the weaving. So it's that kind of interchange, exchange. And I find that fascinating. And the other thing that I like about that weaving, it's very, there's patterns inherent to weaving at the kind of the molecular level, at the cellular level, at the macro level, and or the micro level and the macro level. So you have these real minute patterns that are totally structural, and then you can kind of build from those patterns in terms of dye techniques, in terms of the textures of your wefts. I sometimes use nylon insertions, and those nylon insertions kind of poke out from the surface in a pattern, and it creates a really interesting kind of textural variation. The weaving that's behind me, I'm using metal inserted in the process of weaving. Through the process of weaving, everything is inherent to the structure. Everything is part of the surface, part of the field, and that's really important to me. And yet it really kind of transforms the way we see things, with the way we see the patterns, the way we perceive the patterns. Sometimes they're not so visible when you look straight on, and they're more visible from an angle. Sometimes they're visible straight on, and then they disappear as you move around the weaving. And I like that kind of sense of engagement. Color is one of the things that's really very intriguing to me as an artist. And again, the relationship of color when you're weaving is very distinctive because you have the intersection of the warp and the weft. So whatever the color is in the warp affects the color in the weft. And you can change colors throughout in it, and actually in both directions, although the warp direction coloration has to be kind of predetermined. Sometimes I do some resist dyeing on the warp, or I do painting on the warp that allows it to kind of modulate in a more kind of subtle atmospheric way. And sometimes it's a more strong, kind of more pronounced pattern in the warp, and then also in the weft. And that blending of color, that kind of optical mixing of thread, is really very exciting. And I tend to kind of work with saturated colors, and that kind of interplay of one saturated color with another saturated color is really kind of exciting to me.